Well, can't win them all. I believe that in boxing, and I do believe that in movies. What is up, everybody? Welcome finally to my review of the new installment of the Rocky Creed saga in Creed 3. If you have not been following me, maybe you're following me for the first time, I have spent the last 2 weeks or so going over the entire Rocky and Creed franchise, did full reviews for all of them, had an absolute blast revisiting this franchise, which continues to be a franchise that just, every time I revisit it, just climbs up the list of my favorite movie series of all time. Absolutely adore these movies. I don't think there's a bad one in the bunch. And despite some behind-the-scenes drama regarding Sylvester Stallone and the producers of these films, I have been really eagerly anticipating Creed 3 because I am a huge proponent and believer in Michael B. Jordan, not only as an actor, but was excited to see what he could do as a director. I think that this franchise has proven itself to be able to stand on its own even without Stallone, so despite my inner turmoil, I had confidence that he wasn't going to be a giant glaring hole in the film, and the trailer really got me hooked with what seemed to be a very unique story for this franchise. And so I took my son last night, checked it out at an early fan event at my local theater. Very lucky that they had that going, because I'm always excited to see a movie a little bit early. And while I will absolutely contend that this continues the trend of every single movie in these two franchises being solid at worst, I was a little disappointed in Creed 3. And we'll get into why. Starting off with the positives, I really enjoyed the fact that this movie took such a unique approach in many different aspects. In the story, in the directing style of Michael B. Jordan for sure, in some of the things regarding the thematic exploration of what the person is trying to overcome and the note that we leave the movie on. This is one of the most, if not the most, unique film amongst these now 9 films in these two franchises. Rather than taking the typical route of, all right, you beat that guy in the last film, now there's a bigger fighter in this one kind of takes more of a personal attachment to the eventual reveal of the villain. This is something that explores more of an inner turmoil and the sins of the past of our lead character, to where you have Adonis that has this friend from his past, and in the form of Jonathan Majors, who comes back into the fray later on when he is literally at the height of his life, really, of his career, of his happiness, of being a fucking millionaire, being the next undisputed champion, enjoying retirement, and then this little piece of his past that he would probably have preferred to remain hidden pops back up and brings up a lot of inner turmoil, guilt, regret, and the movie is about exploring that, exploring guilt, exploring regret, and even though this is something that we kind of explored in Creed 2, also exploring redemption here. And so the way that throughout the film it doesn't feel like it's following a typical Rocky or Creed template, it kind of dives back into the past with flashbacks and giving us as the audience members little bits of information throughout the movie, giving a bit of a mystery element there, something to be uncovered by the end. The way that the motivations of the villain played by Jonathan Majors are slowly revealed as well is something really unique to the franchise. And so, despite the fact that there are certainly some things that I had major issues with, I appreciate the living hell out of the fact that Michael B. Jordan and the script writers really went for something different.
I vouch for you. You think you mad? Try spending half your life in a cell. Watching somebody else live your life.
And speaking of Jordan, again, despite the fact that he made some decisions that did not pay off for me that we'll get into, I absolutely commend the fact that this guy had a tight grip on this film as a director. This is his directorial debut, his first film. And you can tell with the way that this film comes across that the entire time he's been an actor, he's also been kind of a student of filmmaking with all of the different directors that he's worked with. Probably predominantly being Ryan Coogler. You see a little bit more similarity to his style in this, but at the same time, Michael B. Jordan has some really unique things that he brings to this, especially in the fight scenes that are really bold, really well executed, that visually they look immaculate, but stylistically they are going to be a little bit divisive. But I appreciate the fact, again, that they did something different. A beloved franchise where you could very easily have just kind of ran through the motions and followed the template and did the same thing that we did in all the Rocky movies and the last two Creed films and had a damn solid movie by the end of it. I appreciate and respect the fact that they wanted to do something different, put their own spin on it, and probably more so, take Creed in a direction away from Rocky where it really stands on its own visually, stylistically, and narratively. And even in front of the camera, Michael B. Jordan continues to be awesome in this role, and something that I commented on in my Creed review, and also kind of in my Creed 2 review, to where there was this little bit of immaturity to the character of Adonis, to where he has these emotional outbursts, and he has these moments of just throwing away all sense of respect just to react to his emotions, that kind of gives me a little small block to really endearing fully to that character. It's fully gone by Creed 3. He's matured so much more as a character, as a person, and I really liked seeing him in this place in his life. Very similar to the journey we had with Rocky Balboa, where you get to see him in all these different little stages of life. We're having that same exact experience with Adonis, to where now he's the father of a young girl who obviously has hearing impairment from the second film. You have a wife that also has the same hearing impairment, that is losing her career and has little complications that she's fighting through, and his career that he is now leaving behind to focus on being a family man. I mean, this is basically a family drama that's just wrapped up in a boxing movie. And all of the emotions, the nuances, and of course throughout the fight scenes, which is, you know, kind of the clincher, those are the money shots, the why we go to see these movies, the physicality that Michael B. Jordan brings. He continues to prove that this character is worth a whole franchise, that he can stand on his own, and there is so much that you can do with him that mirrors and yet has such a tangent from the story and the journey of Rocky Balboa, from which he was birthed. And of course, like probably everybody else who is going to be reviewing and talking about this movie, Jonathan Majors is just fucking awesome. Like, this is a guy, once in a great while, like maybe once every 6 years or so, there is somebody that just shows up out of nowhere in movies, and suddenly he's in like 2 or 3 things back to back that just cement him instantly as a movie star. And Jonathan Majors is that guy for this little era. This guy showed up in Kang, as Kang in Ant-Man and Quantumania, was easily the highlight of that movie. I think he's even better in this one. Without a doubt, one of the best villain performances, one of the most interesting villains as well, because he's genuinely scary. He is genuinely like evil with some of his motivations, and yet he has such a compelling backstory that the movie spends a good amount of time focusing on and getting you to see his side of things, that you somehow sympathize with him to a degree, and you understand where his villainous motivations and his villainous outlook comes from. And that always makes the most compelling villains. And just performance-wise, this dude's going to be around for a while, and I can't wait to see what he does next. He has so much range. I mean, even just in this movie, there's a segment to where he doesn't completely reveal his villainous motivations yet, and he is so charming and endearing and captivating. And then whenever that switch goes off and he's the villain of the movie, that dude is as intimidating as it gets. Now moving on to the mixed aspects, and I feel like mixed is really where most of my emotions with this movie lie. And we'll talk about the elephant in the room first. So obviously, Sylvester Stallone, Rocky, is not involved with this movie in any way, shape, or form. Not the character, not the actor or producer or writer of Sylvester Stallone. There is some bad blood going on between Sylvester Stallone and the producer that owns the rights to this franchise, Irwin Winkler. It's been very public for the past number of months leading up to the release of this film. Stallone's brother kind of ignited the whole thing on Instagram, and Sylvester Stallone has, much more respectfully, shocker, Sylvester more respectful than Frank Stallone, much more respectfully has gotten his grievances out in some interviews, but it's abundantly clear he does not like the producer of this film. He feels wronged. He feels like he was ripped off. He feels like he is entitled to the rights to this franchise, to creative control of this franchise, and he doesn't have it. And so, knowing that, going into this film for months, there's been a bit of a conflicted feeling in me, as is probably the vast majority of Rocky fans, because it's impossible to separate Rocky from Sylvester Stallone and vice versa. They might as well be the same person. Sylvester Stallone is the one who created this franchise. He has directed most of these films, written most of these films. He has guided the storytelling for better and sometimes for worse throughout this entire franchise up to the point of Creed. He's had creative input even in Creed 2. He was a co-writer on that one. And this is the first time in this entire franchise that he has no involvement. He has said publicly he will not watch it, he will not support it, while at the same time publicly supporting Michael B. Jordan, making it clear that he has no issue with him whatsoever. And so my biggest worry walking into this is it going to feel odd being a Rocky fanatic watching this film? Is it going to feel dirty? Something was going to feel off. It was just a matter of how off it was going to feel. And before I talk specifically about my thoughts on his absence in the film, just really quickly, I will say I'm somewhere in the middle on that entire debate. You know, I'm somebody that I think poetically, I guess, it would be awesome for Sylvester Stallone to be the father and the owner of this franchise, not just the person that birthed it and then somebody else runs away with it. At the same time, it's movie business, and I don't know if he did not secure a deal since 1976 to get the rights to this film, or most of the rights to this film, no matter how many attempts he may have made, and I don't know how many he has. I don't know if there's anything necessarily wrong with that. You know, it sucks because we love Sly and we think that, you know, that should be that way, but that's not the way that business works. And so, I don't know. I'm torn on the whole thing. There's a part of me that would love for him to have it and wish that there could be something worked out. And then there's another part of me that understands that the people that bought and paid for this franchise own it. And just because Sylvester Stallone wrote and directed a lot of the movies, that doesn't mean that he automatically can just yank that from them. So it's a very complicated situation that, like most debates and arguments, the truth probably lands somewhere in the middle. But talking specifically about Creed 3, I will say this. The story of this film does not necessarily have a place for Rocky Balboa. And only 2 scenes, predominantly 1, does it actually feel weird that the character of Rocky does not show up. And so, aside from that 1 moment, maybe 2, it didn't really feel like this glaring omission. I wasn't watching this thinking, man, you can really just see all the places that they yanked Rocky out of this script to spite him. It's nothing like that whatsoever. And to be honest with you, Creed 2, I think set up a transitional phase very nicely. And when I saw that film, I kind of accepted that as the last time that we would see Rocky because of the way that they left him with his son and the way that they set up the character of Adonis Creed. It kind of felt like they were all shaking hands and agreeing, okay, kid, it's your franchise now, go run with it. And if it was not for this public drama, I would have probably walked into this and not even thought twice about where is Rocky. But with that being said, I do think that there is a certain bit of heart, a certain bit of inspiration and levity and uplifting nature that is a bit missing from this film that clearly would have come from the character of Rocky. So I don't know where he would have fit in this story aside from that one obvious scene where he seems like he's pretty glaringly omitted. But beyond that, it did feel like the heart and soul of Rocky was a bit missing here. The other mixed element is something that I can't really speak too specifically on because I've said numerous times I am not a sports fan. I do not watch boxing or MMA, so I might be talking out of my ass here a little bit, and I'm sure I'll be corrected down below. Please, by all means, let me know if I'm incorrect with any of this. There's quite a few moments in the story of this movie that feels like convenient movie writing to get boxing matches together. And even as somebody that is not educated in the sport of boxing whatsoever outside of what I've seen in the Rocky franchise and a few others, even I was kind of turning my nose up and raising an eyebrow going, I don't think that's quite the way that it works. And I don't feel that we've had that problem in this franchise ever. And so that was something that kind of stuck out to me as a little bit of sloppy writing there. It didn't take me out of the movie, which is why it's in mixed. It's something that you easily just skate past. You're like, okay, fine. Suspend disbelief, moving on. So I don't think it's going to be something that's going to make or break this movie for anybody that watches it. But it was something where multiple times I was like, that's convenient as hell. And now moving on to the negatives. And unfortunately, I don't know over time and with rewatches and with putting some distance between my first viewing experience and where my thoughts eventually land, how large the negative section of my experience is going to end up being. But the overall tone with my issues with the film are issues that have never really been present in this franchise, and so they stand out so much more within my experience. We'll talk about one right off the bat that's going to be the most hotly debated. Now, again, like I said, I absolutely champion, commend, and respect the hell out of the fact that Michael B. Jordan took some big swings creatively, stylistically to make this film definitively his own. But, and he has said this publicly numerous times in interviews, he has a love for anime, and he was trying to implement some anime style into the fight scenes, and it did not work for me.
I had to lean on my love of Japanese animation and the themes of that to kind of make this one creatively and visually look different.
To be completely transparent, I do not enjoy anime. I don't plan on ever watching a bunch of anime and trying to force myself to like it. It just does not work for me. It's not my thing. I'm sure there's wonderful stories out there. It's not my thing. And so I walk into this and I watch these fight scenes, and while visually, while as a director and the person behind the camera and the way that it's edited and the way that they put some special effects in there, I think he did a damn good job at creating what he was trying to create within those little segments. It just felt so weird within this franchise. It's something that felt so off the beaten path of the grounded realism of this franchise up to this point that it completely took me out. Like in the first fight that opens up the movie, it's quick. It's something really small, and I was like, you know what? That might end up being cool. You know, I'm kind of mixed on it, but it might end up being cool. And then when it returns full force in the final fight of the film, it just goes bonkers. And there's going to be some people that absolutely love it, that are going to champion it for being so unique and visually different and stylistically creative. And then there's going to be people like me that go, whoa, that absolutely destroyed my investment and all of the stakes in that final fight, which is pretty fucking important to a Rocky movie or a Creed film. And all that I've heard and all of the early reactions is how incredible the final fight and the other fights were shot and choreographed. So I am clearly on an island with this, but even beyond that weird stylistic choice for me personally, I didn't feel like the fights were put together all that well because of the way that they were edited. Like, you look back at something like that one-shot take in the fight of Creed, about the middle of the way through the film, where Ryan Coogler keeps zooming in on one boxer, then zooming out wide, then zooming in on one boxer and zooming out wide, and you really feel like you're in the ring. You see every single punch, you feel every single hit, and the editing style that they chose to go with here, I almost got to the point where I couldn't stop focusing on it, because it would do this thing where they would do a couple punches and there'd be a big hit, and then they would stop right before the contact, and then they would cut it, and then it would flip to the opposite perspective, and you would see that last inch of the punch as it made contact, and then the fight would continue, and then it would do it again. And it went back and forth like 6, 7, 8 times, and it just kind of made the experience a little bit hard to follow, where I prefer things to be, able to let breathe and be able to see everything that's going on and feel like there's a good bit of choreography there. And there may have been here, but it was just kind of chopped all to hell to where I couldn't really appreciate it. And so it's because of those two things, the stylistic choices and the editing style, that I could say pretty confidently this is one of, if not maybe, my least favorite final fight out of all 9 of these films. And while there wasn't anything inherently wrong with it, I also wasn't really all that impressed with the training sequence, which is almost just as important as the final fight. It just, when you have the training sequence from some of the Rocky films, the first Creed, especially Creed 2, which is one of my favorites, this one was just kind of underwhelming for me. Aside from that, I think it is glaringly obvious that at least 10, 15 minutes was cut out of this film between Act 2 and 3, and it is incredibly jarring. Like, even looking through the trailer footage when I was editing my little out-of-theater reaction short yesterday, I was seeing all these clips that were not in the movie, which just reinforced my thought that something was just missing. Like, they shoved Act 2 and Act 3 together, and it happened so fast, where the first 2 acts of the films are so deliberately paced, and you're slowly getting reveals, and you're spending time with the characters, and slowly, meticulously building things up and fleshing things out, and then boom, 3rd act, ending, final fight. And I was like, what the fuck? It was just such a pacing change, narratively and just visually, that it totally was just a jarring experience. And unfortunately, after you kind of get down from the high of all the high-octane stuff that you're watching in the third act, like the training sequences and the face-off and the final fight and the credits roll, and you start to think about it, and there is a good bit of storyline that doesn't feel like it was built up to that third act very effectively. There's some storylines, like side stories and little subplots in the film, that feel like they were absolutely abandoned, as if their payoff before the third act or within the third act was just yanked from the movie. It's honestly to the point where it felt like there was a major time jump that they forgot to put like a graphic like 8 months later, a year later or something. And so you start to see things and see where people are and see the people around them and the things that they have, and you're going, how did they get all of that? When did that happen? The last time I saw them, they were this, and now they're this. There's even a subplot involving Adonis's daughter, where she is getting in fights in school, and him and Bianca have very different ideologies about how to deal with that, to where Adonis, growing up as a kid on the streets, growing up as a fighter, kind of wants her to be able to defend herself. His wife Bianca wants her to be able to solve things without fighting. Not the most original subplot in the world. We've seen that a bunch of times in movies like this, but because it's characters that I care about, I was invested in that. And it never felt like that storyline came to any kind of a conclusion. It felt like it was just kind of chopped off when there was a very clear and obvious way for that to tie into all of the thematic payoff in the third act. And it just never came. Now, those two being the biggest issues that I have with the film, two other things that were much smaller issues that I feel like I have to talk about. One of which is that there are moments in this film, one in particular, where I felt like it was more melodrama than organic drama, which is something that has not been an issue in this Creed franchise yet. It's not really an issue that I've had with the franchise at all, except for Rocky III. And so there's moments here that are supposed to drain a lot of emotions out of you, and the actors do really well with it, but I just felt a little disconnected from it because it just kind of felt a little bit manufactured. Can't talk too specifically about it, but I think when you see it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And the final thing, again, this is minor. This is absolutely minor. Despite the fact that this movie takes a really unique narrative direction from all the other films in this franchise, it does have quite a few parallels to Warrior. Now, Warrior is one of my favorite films of all time. That is, without a doubt, my favorite sports movie of all time. So if you're going to take cues from a movie, that's a hell of a one to pick. But as somebody that loves that film, has watched it countless amount of times, damn near know it like the back of my hand, there was a bit of familiarity to the beats of this film that I wish could have maybe surprised me a little bit more. So all in all, guys, again, this is a very solid movie. I think if you're a fan of Rocky, if you're a fan of Creed, you're still going to enjoy this for the most part. There's a lot of people that are going to enjoy it way more than I did just because of those very subjective opinions on some of the stylistic choices here that took me out and are going to be highlights for a lot of other people. But this is a film that is easily my least favorite of the Creed films, and when I eventually rank all 9 of these films this weekend, this one is unfortunately going to be on the lower end of that list. Well, that's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please click over here for all of my Rocky and Creed reviews. Also, please like and share and hit that subscribe button so you do not miss my Rocky and Creed ranking coming out this weekend. As always, thank you for watching, and remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.